So Thierry, I think without further ado, we'll turn that over to you.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. Can you see my slides? Okay, good. So thank you very much. Oh, so I will give a short survey talk on the work we have done in Toulouse from the last 10 years. So I will be 4 parts in these talks. In the first 2 parts, I will present some results on Sobol indices, first in dimension 1, then in higher dimensions. And then I will explain how we can define sensitivity indices that depends on the whole distribution and go from an output space that is a finite dimensional vector space to some very general output space like general metric spaces. And then I will end in the last part talking about sensitivity indices for when you are dealing with stochastic codes. Okay. So if you want some more detail on what I will talk, for the first 2 sections, you can read here the 4 papers you can see in the slide. So it's a joint work with, you have Alexandre Janon, Agnès Lagnoux that is here, Maël Naudet, Clémentine Prieur that is also here, I think, Fabrice Gamboa that should be here, and also Pierre for the last paper. And for section 3 and 4, there is 3 papers. So again, with Fabrice and Agnès, and with Jean-Claude Faure. Okay. So the general framework is that we have some input space that is a product of k different spaces. And we have some input variables, x1 to xk, that I assume to be independent, okay? And we have some output space that is some metric spaces, okay? And we have a computer code, a black box model that if you give him some inputs, x1, xk, it gives you the output z that belongs to the metric space, okay? So the aim is to define sensitivity indices, and also as we are statisticians, and that as in practical application, the code F is unknown. We want to be able to estimate those indices. Okay, so we start with the simpler case is when the output space is just the real number is R, okay? So what is done is that you use the Hoeffding decomposition of the variance. That means that the variance of the output, Z, can be split in 2 parts that are uncorrelated. So you have that the variance of Z is the sum of some variances. And so if you take some variable that you are interested in, so there are the indices that are in V, that is a subset of the space of all input, 1K, you can define what is called the Sobol index for the input variables V, that is the ratio between the variance of the conditional expectation of the output knowing the input variables you are interested in divided by the global variance. Okay, so this gives the relative influence of some input variance with respect to the total variance. Okay, so now if you want to estimate this quantity, so there are several methods of estimations. I will present 2 of them, the 2 we have been working on. So the first one that I call the peak freeze method. So what do? You took a first vector of input variable x1, xk, okay? And then you take also an independent copy of this input vector, okay? And you will constrict the pick-through input variable xv, so this is a vector of dimension k. And how do you proceed? You said, okay, the coordinate a of this input is xi if I is in v, and is x prime I if I is not in v. Okay, so now you have x, you have your input x, you have the pick-through input variable xv. Okay, so you can compute the corresponding output, that is z and zv. And what happens is that you see the numerator, that is the variance of a conditional expectation, is just the covariance between z and zv. Okay, so now if you want to estimate a Sobol index, it's very easy because you have the ratio between some covariance and some variance. So you just have to replace the covariance by the empirical covariance and the variance by the empirical variance. So you took one end sample of Z, ZE, ZI, and another end sample of ZV, ZIV, okay? And you just compute the ratio between the empirical covariance and the empirical variance, okay? Now, if you think about in terms of cost, so cost is that your computer code could take a long time to run. Here you need to compute 2 times n values of your output. Okay, so what we proved is that this estimator has some very nice property. It means that it converges at the rate square root of n, and you have a central limit theorem. Okay, and also this theorem we also have it for several jointly for several indices, so you can build some statistical tests. For example, if you want to know if S1 is smaller than S2, you can build a statistical test, and that will cost you 3 times n computation of your code. Okay, so central limit theorem is an interesting theoretical result. The problem is that it's only an asymptotic result, and we know that in practice we never have n equals to infinity. So we also prove some results for a fixed n. Okay, so we have some concentration inequality. So what is the meaning of this inequality? It means that if you want to have, you fix the error you want. So here the error is t, okay? And if you want to have the probability that your error is larger than t, you can know what n you should have to be sure that this error has a very small probability, okay? And also we have a Berry SN result that quantifies the convergence to the Gaussian distributions. Okay, but this what is interesting with these two results is they are true for any value of n. Okay. So if we think a little bit, the Pick-Freeze method, so it's a very powerful method. We have some very nice theoretical results of convergence of the estimator. One of the drawbacks is that, for example, if you want to estimate the k order 1 Sobol indices, it requires k plus 1 times n calls of the computer code. Okay, so if your code is very costly, maybe it's unrealistic to be able to do that. Okay, so we'll present now another estimation procedure that is based on rank statistics. Okay, and the motivation is the following. You want to estimate all order 1 Sobol indices with a unique n sample of the input variable, and also a unique n sample of the output. Okay, so here we consider the particular case where the input spaces are only real random variables. Okay, and we are seeing the case where the output space is R. Okay. So the idea comes back from a paper of Saurav Chatterjee, that is a very recent paper published in JASA this year. Okay, so you have your n inputs and your n outputs. Okay, so you have for the first variable, you are x11, x21, xn1, and you have the corresponding outputs z1, z2, zn. Okay, what you do is that those n pairs, you reorder them such that the first coordinate are increasing. Okay, so maybe it's clearer with a small example. Assume that we have only a sample of size 6. Okay, so you have the first x1 is 1 and the output is 5. The second x1 is 2 and the output is 9 and so on. So you reorder this sample. So you are looking for the smaller x1, so it is -2. So you put the pair -2, 3 at the first position. Then you take a look at the second smaller x1 is 0, so you put 0, 8 at the second position and so on. So this is the reorder sample of my original sample. Okay. So now I have my reorder sample. And what you do when you want to estimate, for example, S1, is that for the denominator, you just use the classical empirical variance. And for the numerator, what you do is that you take the sum of the product of zy and zy plus 1 here, and then here you just subtract the empirical mean. Okay. And using the result of Chatterjee, it's very easy to see that this estimator converges almost surely to S1. Okay, but what we have done, reordering with respect to the first variable, you can do the same thing reordering with respect to the second or the third variable. And hence, with the same n sample, you can estimate all Sobol indices. Okay, so let me just give a little example where we do some numerical comparison of the two estimator procedures. So we consider the Sobol G function. Okay, so you have the form here. So for this example, we choose to take AI equals to I, and the input variable xi are uniformly distributed on 0, 1. In that case, we have a closed formula for all order 1 Sobol indices. So you have the formula here. Okay. And we decide to say that, okay, the computational budget is 700. So that means that we can only compute the output 700 times. And with that, we want to estimate all order 1 Sobol indices. Okay. So we do that with both estimation procedure. And we repeat this experiment 500 times and compare the error of both methods. Okay. So in the next slide, you have the box plot of the error. So on the left-hand side is the error with the rank statistics method. And on the right-hand side is the error with the peak freeze method. So we see that with the rank statistic method is much better. We have the result are much more concentrated than with the peak freeze method. Okay. So now I will explain how we go from dimension 1 to finite dimensional space. So now my output space is not R, but is R P with P larger than 1. Okay. What happens is that the ability decomposition of the variance is still valid in dimension larger than 1. Okay, so we can split the variance with some of terms that are the variance of conditional expectations. Okay, if you remember, what we have done in dimension 1 is that we have divided this equality by the variance of Z. Okay, so the problem now is that the variance of Z is not a real number anymore, but is a matrix. So it's not very clear how it is possible to divide by the matrix. So the idea is, first, we project in some sense this equality in dimension 1, and then we can divide. Okay, so how do we do that? We take an arbitrary square matrix M. We multiplied our inequality by this matrix on the left side, and then we take the trace of the matrices. And then we divide by the trace of M sigma. Okay, so that for any matrix M, this defines some kind of sensitivity measure, SUMF. Okay, that is a ratio between two traces. Okay, so it's obvious that these indices are between 0 and 1, exactly like the Sobol indices, they sum to 1. And if we change the output basis, so we just change the way we saw the output with an orthonormal transformation, we see that the indices is changed like it is written on the slide. Okay, and of course, if your dimension of the output is 1, you just recover for any matrix M, you have the same index, and this is the Sobol index. Okay, so if you think a little bit, what you want is that if you change the way you are looking at the output, okay, if you do just a rotation of your output, you don't want that your index changed, okay? So if you put that as a requirement, the only way to choose the matrix M is to take the identity matrix of dimension P. So doing so, one generalization, possible generalization of Sobol index in dimension larger than 1 is just to do this ratio of the traces, okay? What is interesting is that this index was already studied by Martinianu, Mono, and Makowski in 2011, but they introduced it doing PCA, so with another point of view. Okay, and as in dimension 1, it's not difficult to proceed as the P-Frege estimation of this index and to have some central limit terrain and so on. Okay, so now I will go to the third part of my talk. So if you think, so the Sobol indices, they are based on the variance decomposition. So they only quantify the relative influence of an input variance on the mean behavior of the code. Okay, they only depend on the variance of the output. Okay, but if you think the variance is just an indicator, and maybe it's more interesting to have an index that depends on the whole distribution of the output. Okay, so there are several ways to do that. I will present the one we studied. So the framework is now, my output space is Rm, okay? So one output Z is a vector of dimension M, and let T be a generic point of Rm, okay? And I will say that Z is smaller than T if each coordinate of Z are smaller of corresponding coordinate of T. And I define one random variable, so I fix one point T in Rm, and define yt of Z as the indicator function that Z is smaller than T. Okay, so Ft is the generalization of the cumulative distribution function of Z, and Fvt is just the conditional version of Ft if you are knowing some of the input variables. Okay, so for any fixed T, yt of Z is just one real random variable. So we can write the Hoeffding decomposition of this real random variable. In this decomposition, a generic term is of the form the variance of the conditional expectation of YTZ knowing some of the input variables. So you have a collection of Hoeffding decomposition of variance. For any T in RM, you have an Hoeffding decomposition of the variance. So what you can do, you can integrate all this decomposition with respect to T, okay? And you integrate it with respect to T and with respect to the law of the output, so this is F, and then you renormalize, and that gives you what is called the Kramer von Mises index. So is the integration of Rm of the variance on the conditional expression of YT Z known XV divided by the integration of the variance Ft 1 minus Ft. Okay. Okay, so now if you want to estimate this index, you have two parts in this index. You have a first part that is some kind of a Sobol index, and you have another part that is an integration with respect to T. Okay, so in terms of cost for your code, you will need 2 n samples for the peak freeze method and a third n sample to deal with the integration. Doing so, you can build an estimator, and it's not too difficult to prove a central limit theorem for this estimation procedure. Okay, so now what can we do if our output space is not a real vectorial space of finite dimension, but it's just a generic metric spaces? What we'll do is that we'll replace, here we had YT of Z. So YT of Z, what it does, you have some, you have a parametric class of function. So it's parameterized by T, and it links the output Z to some real number, okay? So we will do the same thing. You take X, so X, you have to think it as your output. You have some parameter R, and you have some function that takes a parameter and the output and gives you a real number YA of X, okay? So for each YA of Z, you can do the Hoeffding decomposition. As previously, we integrated with respect to R, and you have a generic index that is SV2 of GMS. Okay, here, the integration measure is just the R times the convolution of the law of your output Z. Okay, so just let me give you some particular cases. Maybe it would be more clearer. If you assume that your metric space X is R, and you take your parameterized test function family of dimension 1, so small r equal to 1, and you take YA of X, it just does not depend on A, just X. This formula just gives you the classical Sobol indices. Okay, now if you take X equal R to K, again, R equals to 1, and you take YA of X is the indicator function that X is smaller than Y, A, you just recovers the Kramer von Mises index that I just presented just before, okay? Now, if X is a compact manifold M, if you take R equals to 2 and you take as test function the indicator that X belongs to a ball of, for example, diameter A1, A2, you recover the index defined by Freiman, Gamboa, and Moreno in 2017. Okay, now if you want to estimate those kind of indices, you have at least 3 approaches. The first one is you just use the classical peak freeze method and Monte Carlo method to deal with the integration part. So in that case, you will need n times n plus k plus 1 calls of your code to estimate all order 1 indices. Okay. And it's possible to establish a central limit to RM. It's not too easy. You will need to use the functional data method, but it can be done. The second approach is to use a peak freeze method and to use a result of UFDing on new statistic to deal with the integration part. And if you do that, you just need n times k plus 1 calls of the code to estimate all order 1 indices. And the central limit theorem is much more easy to prove. And the last method, if your input variables are real, you can use the tricks on rank statistics. And in that case, you just need n calls of the code to estimate all order 1 index. Okay. Now, if we take a look at the formula here, defining S2 GMSV, we see that we impose that the parametric class of function, the point I belongs to the output space. And we impose that we integrate with respect to the law of the output. But there's no need to do that. You can relax this requirement and just letting A belongs to some generic space omega and take any generic probability measure on the space omega. And in that case, you define an order and this that we call universal that has exactly the same form. And we'll see that in some cases it could be interesting, in case of stochastic code, interesting to relax, can take another probability measure here or another space omega. Okay. So now we'll start the last part of my talk, dealing with stochastic codes and second level sensitivity analysis. So what is a stochastic code? It's just a code. If you give him twice the same input variable, it gives you 2 different outputs. Okay, so for a fixed x, f of x can change. So you are interested in the distribution of the output for any given x. Okay, so one way to see stochastic code is to think about stochastic code is in fact a deterministic code where I have 2 kinds of inputs. The inputs x that are the one that I can control, that I know of, and another hidden random input that is denoted by D here, that is chosen, let's say, by the computer code. Okay, so if you give to the computer 2 times the same time x, the computer code it will give you 2 different value of D, and that's why you have 2 different output values. Okay, and you can also see this stochastic code as a deterministic code that to an input x gives you the distribution of the output mu x. Okay. Of course, in practice, you don't have access to mu x, but you can obtain a natural approximation of the measure mu x by using n evaluation of your statistics code at the point x. And so now you have the discrete empirical measure that is 1 over n, the sum of the Dirac mass at the point fsx dg, and dg are chosen by the computer code. So we can think about stochastic code as deterministic code taking values in some probability measure space. So in order to use the result of the previous section, I will put a metric on the space of probability measure. So for example, you can choose the Wasserstein distance W2 of order 2. So if Z is in dimension 1, is in R. You have an explicit formula to compute the square of the Wasserstein distance between two probability measures. It's just the integration between 0 and 1 of the square of the difference between the quantile function of your two distribution. So now, using the framework of the previous section, section 3, you can define at least two sensitivity index for this computer code. So using a Wasserstein balls here, so here you see that you integrate with respect to dp is the law of the output. I recall that here the output is a measure, so it's a law over probability measures. Okay, or you can choose change, as I explained, the space here by I don't consider that my class of test function parameterized by A, the A does not belong to W to R, but it belongs to 0, 1, and then I can have another index for computer codes. Okay, and now if you want to estimate, for example, the first index, what you can do, so you take your classical peak-free sample. Okay, so you have here a sample of size n. For each value, you compute the output small n times. Okay, so now you will have a sample of size 2 times n times small n. The distribution mu xi is approximated by the empirical version. In order to compute the Wasserstein distance when you have an empirical distribution, it's very easy because we know that if you have two discrete distributions, the square of the Wasserstein distance is just the mean of the difference between the reordered sample. Okay, and so using that, it's easy to construct an estimator, and we prove under some condition a central limit theorem for our estimator. Okay. So now just one slide, two slides on second level sensitivity indices. So second level sensitivity indices is when you want to perform sensitivity analysis on the choice of the distribution of the input variables. Okay, so how you can do that? Assume that mu I is the distribution of the input xi. Okay, so usually someone tells you, okay, mu1 is the Gaussian distribution, but maybe you don't want to do that. You want to have some flexibility on the choice of each input distribution. So you can say, okay, I assume that mu I belongs to some parametric family of probability measure. Okay. So Pi is some family of probability. Okay. And now you put a law on the parameter theta. And thanks to that, you can see, you can embed this setting in stochastic code. It means that you construct a stochastic code. So for each choice of mu1, mu p, you draw one variable that has distribution mu1, mu2, mu p, and then you compute the output. So if you change, if you compute two times fs the mu1, mu p, you will sample another x1, so you will have a different output. So you are exactly in the framework of stochastic codes. Okay, I think I will stop there. So I'm happy to answer any questions.
Well, Thierry, thank you very much for this very nice overview. So we have plenty of time for questions, actually. So I don't know if you guys want to just jump in or raise your hand in one way or another we have questions for Thierry?
Yeah. Joe ID, go ahead.
Thank you so much. Very nice talk.
Thank you.
When I've been trying some of these things, the inputs are not independent.
Yeah.
So if we assume they are independent, we can even get some strange results because it's not physically possible.
Mm.
So the code crashes. But I think there's been some stuff done there too. I don't know if you can get the same nice theorems.
I'm not sure we can have the same nice theorem, but indeed there's work that have been done. I didn't work on that topic personally, but I know that one of my co-authors, I think Clémentine Prieur, did work using Shapley values to define sensitivity indices in the case of dependent variables. And also Fabrice Gamboa, one of my co-authors with and Clémentine Prieur and one of their PhD students, Gaël Chassin, they define a theory to in the case of input variables. So
Thanks.
these are the two works I know of.
Harry, you mentioned using profiting central limit theorem for U statistics and the delta method in order to get one of your results.
Yeah.
And I wanted to sort of get a little bit more information on how you do that. Are you using the central limit theorem first and then applying the delta method to get the results?
Yeah. Let's say that yeah, you use Hoeffding central limit for U statistic to have a first central limit theorem, and then you transform it with a differentiable function that gives you exactly what you want.
I see. Thank you.
It's almost straightforward. Once you know the result of Hoeffding, it's the proof is almost obvious.
Thank you.
So we have a question in the chat from Elizabeth. I'll read it out. In the second part of the talk, regarding sensitivities for multi-valued outputs, could you elaborate on what the indices mean intuitively? For example, are the sensitivities of the different outputs being averaged or combined in some other way?
I think it's for me it's the exact generalization of a Sobol index in higher dimension. I don't know if I answered well the question, but
Sure, let me jump in.
Yeah.
So when you say it's the exact analog, I just don't know what that means. So if you have two outputs and say output one is very sensitive to input one, so it has a high sensitivity index, and then output two is very insensitive, what is your higher dimensional Sobol index going to tell me?
yeah, I think that, in that case S1 will be larger than S2. The Sobol index in a higher dimension is a real number. Okay. So you can rank your input variables with respect to the value of the Sobol index in higher dimension.
But if you have two outputs and they have very different sensitivities to your inputs,
so here it's global. It's on the global output. Okay. You mean if you do a sensitivity analysis component-wise? So that's another possibility. So that I think there are people that are doing that, but here our point of view is that we want the sensitivity on the globally on the output.
Yeah, I understand that you're doing a global sensitivity measure, but so if you do, what I'm asking is some intuition. If you were to do a component-wise sensitivity analysis, you have two outputs with very different results.
Yeah.
What is the global output going to tell you?
So you might have a ranking that is different if you are working component-wise or globally, but it just for me it means that it tells you globally on the mean behavior of your output.
Okay, so you're averaging the outputs.
Yeah, because the Sobol indices they are based on the variance. Okay, so and the variance quantifies how you move from the mean behavior.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Terry. We have kind of a follow-up as well on this topic from Michael Smith. In the answer to the previous question, did you mention that you use Shapley values for dependent variables? Are there cases where you would want to use Sobol versus Shapley values?
I think there are maybe two questions in that question. First, you can define a lot of indices. Okay, so one question is that if you're interested in the mean behavior of your code, it's a good idea to use Sobol indices. If you are interested in the extreme value of your code, it's not a good idea to use Sobol indices because a variable that is very influent for the mean behavior might not be very influent for extreme value of your code. So that's the first point. And then I think, the question was in case of dependent inputs, I think that was the question.
Yes, it was related to for dependent variables.
I think using Sobol indices in the case of dependent inputs is not a good idea. The interpretation is not clear when you have a dependent inputs. You can define them, you can estimate them, but the interpretation is really not clear. But I think Shapley value are better in that case.
Any more questions for Thierry? If not, I may actually have one. So Thierry, I think that was on your last slide when you were talking about second level indices. My question kind of may be related to the very first question we had. So what are your thoughts about second level analysis working directly with the joint distribution? Because here you're looking at the distribution for each individual parameters, right?
Yeah. But as I am in the case of independent random variables, I mean, I think your question is very interesting. Where if your input are not independent. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I'm always in the framework where I assume that the input variables are independent.
Okay.
So yeah, I agree. If your input are not independent, I don't know what to do. Clearly.
Okay, well, Thierry, thank you again.
You're welcome.
Kind of funny, we cannot really clap or anything like in a meaningful way. Yeah.